When you think of aliens, many envision the Greys or the reptilians. Some people think of the xenomorphs from Aliens, but some people think of blobs, the slime like oozes that you fight in JRPGs and other games. For our first deep dive, I want to talk about an alleged encounter of such blobs. It's December 20th, 1958 in Domsten, Sweden. Two friends, Stig Rydberg and Hans Gustafsson, were coming home after a long night out with their girlfriends. At 3 a.m., they needed to pull over to relieve themselves and stretch, and when they did, they saw a strange glowing light that was beyond a camping prohibited sign. Apparently very brave, the two decided that they wanted to investigate the glowing lights. The pair went into the woods, and that's where they saw it, the craft. It was described as luminescent, 5 meters in diameter and less than a meter tall. It was resting on 3 legs similar to a tripod. But that's not what we're here for. What we're here for is what they said was surrounding the craft. Small, loaf-shaped blue-gray jelly blobs no more than a meter tall. They were described as protozoa-looking and having a burnt or an ether-like smell. You would think that such small, statured creatures wouldn't pose much of a threat, but they were actually able to grab onto both of the men with a suction-like force where they dragged them towards the craft. Their numbers and their jelly-like consistency overwhelmed the two men. In later interviews, they said that they were able to punch some of the jelly blobs, but their fists would just go through. Rydberg was able to struggle enough to get away and ran towards the car. In hopes of getting someone's attention, he blared on the horn. The loud sound scared the blobs. They stopped chasing the pair, rushed to their UFO, and flew off, leaving a burnt smell behind. The event took no more than 5 minutes. At first, they agreed not to talk about the event. They thought people would laugh at them, think that they're crazy, accuse them of drinking too much. And I can imagine it might be a little embarrassing to admit that you were overwhelmed by such tiny little creatures. But that night, neither were able to sleep well. Both men lived with Gustafsson's mother, Anna, along with her son, Bengt. Next morning at the breakfast table, they decided to tell the family about what happened. At first, everyone laughed, but later, Anna decided it might be a good idea to call the newspaper. Sweden's largest newspaper, which I'm having trouble pronouncing, so I'm not going to, interviewed the two. Now that the story was out in the open, it grabbed the attention of law enforcement. On January 9th, the local police asked the two to come in for some questioning. At the questioning, there were multiple police officers, multiple detectives, the Swedish government, and a German military psychologist. Some of the sources I was seeing were also showing concerns that the German military psychologist and his lab tech didn't know Swedish very well, bringing some people to think that the medical and psychiatric tests weren't done properly. Last but not least, the Swedish UFOologist Sven Schwallen also interviewed the pair. The questioning was done under concern by the Swedish military regarding sovereign airspace, but with major skepticism. It included just general questioning, medical and psychiatric tests, and they even left the two men alone in a room and recorded it in hopes that they would just admit that it was a hoax while they weren't around. After all of that, the Swedish military publicly denounced the encounter as a hoax. Others have also suggested that Anne, the mother, wanted to push this story to the newspapers in order to generate interest in her dry cleaning business. The encounter was later mentioned in the book Strangers from the Skies, but under a new name, Terrible Flying Jelly Bags. And that's it. That's the most that you can find about this event online. People that are interested in cryptozoology and UFOs have been sharing the story around, but it's the same key facts just repeated, sometimes even the exact words. I'll list my sources down below, but sadly some of my sources are questionable because they're on things like podcasts and blog posts. I wanted to see if there was any primary or secondary sources that we can get to learn a little bit more about what was going on, and I went back into the archives of the newspaper that was referenced, and I was unable to find anything. Though I could have been looking poorly because it was all in Swedish. Online, I was able to find what looks like a cutout from the newspaper, but I have no way of verifying that that is where it came from. Although this account isn't too grand, we have a few names that are popping up here that are going to show up in later deep dives. I would not be surprised if Sven Schalen showed up again. But the two key players that we're looking at are Brad Steiger, the writer of Strangers from the Skies, and Jean Duplanter, who has made art depicting this event. Both are notable UFO conspiracists from the 1960s to 70s. This story was really fun to look into, in part because it was so condensed and simple. It felt like a good entry point to this series. If you have any ideas of what we should name this series, or have any ideas of what we should cover in a future deep dive, please leave them down below. Thank you for not trying to beat me up because of my bad Swedish, and see you guys next time.